workout. Today, we are going to go through the Unlock Your Hinge workout inside the Unlock Your Movement program that most of my crew is going on. So we have people tuning in from all over the world, from Canada, US, and Australia this morning. But this workout will be really good for those that struggle with lower back pain, and if their cause or their potential problems are a lot of sitting, where our glutes switch off and things like that, as we're going to focus purely on posterior chain to lengthen hamstrings, reactivate glutes, take a bit of that stress off the lower back, and move through our sequence that way. So let's get started. As with everything, we're going to start with a bit of trigger point here. So trigger point ball for our foot release. Grabbing that, and we're just going to stand on top of that ball like we have been. So if you tuned in on the chat or you've joined, feel free to comment or say good day. Happy to answer any questions throughout the workout at the end of the session. But we're just going to start with that foot release. Now, like we have done in previous workouts, we're simply just going to walk around on that ball until we find a sore spot. And then we're going to put out the cigarette. And then we're going to try and pick that ball up by squeezing our toes. We're trying to grip the ball. So we're going to be here for about a minute, working around, finding those sore spots. You should be able to work on the instep of that foot. And no doubt, most of you will find one or two sore spots. So working along there. Make sure you squeeze that ball with the toes once you hit a sore spot there, and changing it up. Now, like we've done with previous workouts, your trigger point shouldn't take forever, and hence why I sort of run it timed through our app here, because if you spend all day trigger pointing, you end up not getting to the actual work, and then you sort of miss out on most of the workout just by having to focus on trigger point stuff. So remember, mobilize, stabilize, and integrate. You can't spend all day at mobilize and then hope that your body and your performance is going to get any better. So sharp, short. If you want to work on it a bit more, do it in the time around the workouts. A little bit longer now. So this foot's feeling drastically better than the other foot on my body. So you might notice a difference in sides as well, like we've discussed in previous workouts like this. It's what's called an asymmetry, and asymmetries are perfectly normal. Okay, moving on now to our calf and antib release. Now, we've done calves in previous workouts where we've worked on the back. Let's work on antibs. So clasping that ball, interlocking fingers, dragging that up the muscle next to the shin bone until you find a sore spot. Now, pulling in, applying a bit of pressure, we're going to lift that foot. And then once we find that sore spot, we're simply just going to do some foot circles one way, 4 of those, foot circles the other way, and foot drops. So you're just going to let that foot slap down. So we're not even going to control it, we're just going to let it go. And 4 of those. So we're just going to 4, 4, and 4. So 4 foot circles left, 4 foot circles right, and then 4 foot slaps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if you struggle finding that spot on your antib or anterior tibialis, that's okay too. You might not have any big trigger points there. Find the spot that feels like it's the most tender and just work there. And then don't be afraid to move it around for some of the movements. If you feel like you can't quite get it, just take your time. Sometimes it takes a little bit of practice to get that right trigger point. And then also, sometimes we don't have one, which is a good thing. We might just be in good shape, and we're simply just helping promote a bit of blood flow through the area by doing this type of thing. There's nothing wrong with that as well, because that preps us for activity. So 4 foot circles left, 4 foot circles right, and don't forget those foot slaps. A little bit longer now. Go through one more time. Okay, next one's our psoas release. So laying down onto our stomach, an inch beside the belly button, we're going to place that ball in there. So an inch beside the belly button, left or right, does not matter. Start one side. Remember the sequence from previous workouts. It's breathing in, on the breath out, arch up and push into the ball. Feel free to wriggle around a little bit if you want. And then breathing in, breath out, arch up, pull forward slightly with the arms. So you'll feel like you're dragging yourself across the floor a little bit. Breathe in, arch up, pull forward, leg up on the side the ball's on. So we're just going to sit here for a bit now. Coming back down, breathe in, arch up, pull forward, leg up. That we have the ball on. So the side of the ball is the side we're working. Big breath. Now, if this is tender, just spend your time changing over now. Let's go back to the opposite side. So inch beside the belly button. Now, if this is tender, simply just lay here and breathe into the ball. So remember the breath out, just arching up on the first one. Arch up, pull forward. Arch up, pull forward, leg up. One more. Like I said, if it's sore, just breathe into the ball. Use that diaphragmatic breath to push into the ball, breathing into it. A little bit longer now. And coming out of that. All right, next one we have is our quad release. We're going to work on VMO today. So we're not going to work the whole quad like previous workouts. We're going to stick with this trigger point ball. And we're looking for that teardrop part of your quad there, right? So the inside or the medial side of your knee, or next to your knee. So if we're just going to lay down on top of that ball in our firing position here, like we're at the range, and we're simply just going to roll that VMO out here. So if it slips, just readjust. You might notice that if you have chronically tight adductors or you've done a lot of legs, this little VMO might be quite sore. So taking your time there. Now you can roll your VMO out by using a trigger roller. Preference is a trigger point ball for this one though, because we can cross friction, so up and down, not just side to side, but up and down as well. So we want to be able to do all the movements there, but this is a bit more targeted. So we can focus on working here. So changing it up now. Working on that VMO. You might not be able to see that. We'll just pivot. There we go. So cross frictions up and down as well as side to side. The best part about most of this is you can just sort of cater the movements to suit your own individual sort of needs, but we can just work kicks. Oh, if it falls out, that's okay too. And we can just breathe through it. So don't forget to breathe, team. When we find we get under a bit of tension, we start to hold our breath or manipulate our breathing pattern. The trick is just to maintain those deep belly breaths as best as we can. And that's best achieved through nasal breathing, to be honest. Better oxygenation, better effect. Okay, next one is our glutes. So we are going to aim for that back pocket of our jeans. So grabbing that ball and wedging that in. So you shouldn't be right on top of it. The ball should be wedged in against your glutes there. And we're aiming for the top of your back pocket. And we're simply going to clamshell, so dropping your knee outwards, externally rotating that hip, And we're going to go for some kicks. And we're going to go for some pivots. So we're going to draw a circle on the floor with our glutes. So clamshells, kicks, pivots. Now wriggle around, find those little spots, get a bit more onto this lateral side if you want. If you can find the sore spots, you might not be able to clamshell in this position, but we're following that lateral hip line as well. All right, and changing it over. So top of your back pocket of your jeans, wedging that ball in. So we're not right on top, it's more wedged in against there. And we're clamshells, kicks. If you got busted joints like mine, you'll hear clicks and pops, but that's okay as long as there's not pain there. And then pivots. Clamshells, kicks, pivots, and don't forget you can come over into side kneeling and work that lateral hip as well if you're a bit tight on the side of your hips, just around from your glutes. Getting around a TFL pocket if you can. Give it a good drive into. And then finally, QL release. So lower back. Muscle beside the spine, we're going for the edge of that muscle, so we're coming out a little bit further from the center line of the body and we're laying on our back. So it shouldn't be right on our spine and it should be just on the edge of that line of muscle next to our spine there. So we're simply just going to bring the leg up and we're going to roll around. So this one's definitely one you can use for your breathing team. So breathing into the belly. Imagine you're trying to breathe into the ball. And that's the trick there. So we're just spending a bit of time working into that lower back and releasing that. So then we can, once we release it, we can lengthen it with a bit of stretching, mobility-based work, and then we can activate everything around it. So the lower back takes a bit of tension out of it and we can get on with our day. So switching over now, leg up, knee up, sorry. And we're just taking our time. Now, this one might be a bit hard for people to find, but it's the edge of that muscle beside the spine. Okay, so it's not on top of the muscle. You should just be wedging in against it, kind of like our glutes, because we don't want to just go for full pressure from the ball into the area. You really just want to coach that slowly, breathing in. Breathing out. Coach it slowly, and over time you'll feel it release and the tension will back down throughout the muscle group as well. So don't force it. If you're stiff, you're sore, take your time. All right, I'm coming up out of there. So the big thing is remembering you can use your foam roller, but trigger point ball is more targeted and more accurate for those more direct approaches. And making sure when you get to a level where the foam roller doesn't work anymore, you can upgrade to a ball. And there's also different types of equipment as well that you can use. You can look at things like a massage gun if that's really your jam, but they're quite expensive. And they will obviously cost a bit of money, but they're well worth it if you're going to use it regularly enough. Now, we're going to go through the workout phase of the hinge workout. So we're going to have target posterior chain. So we're going to lengthen through our mobilization techniques, and then we're going to stabilize the area with some glute activation, some hamstring work, and then some full pattern stuff. So inside the app, you're going to have a multitude of options to choose from. And you can choose whatever works for you. But we'll start off with some really basic stuff, and then I'll change and phase through different options throughout the workout. Okay, so first one we can do is called a strap stretch. Now, I've got a bit of equipment here. I've said you don't need equipment. So what I want you to do is sub this with a door frame. So you can have your leg up on the door when we go through the exercise, and you can let the other leg pass through the door frame. Okay, so you don't have to use a strap. I just have one, and then obviously for coaching's sake, I'm here. It's a lot easier than moving the camera. So we're going to lay down on our back. Now, for the walls here, we're just going to get as close to the wall as we can that allows that leg to get high, right? So we're going to have our foot against the wall or our foot in the strap here. We can use a thing like a belt or anything like that. Really doesn't matter. But then what we're going to focus on is keeping our toes on the down leg pointed to the roof. So don't let your toes open up. So if we look from here, if we let our toes open, we're opening this hip angle here. So we want to keep toes to the roof and pulling into that stretch where we can feel that down our posterior chain here. Now we're going to hold here for about a minute or so, but I'm also, while you're holding here, I'm going to show you through, if you do have a strap, you can do some PNF style stretching. So proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And what that means is just taking it through range and increasing awareness, essentially. Okay, so what we can do is kick low, kick in the middle, and then kick into a light stretch. Okay, so we can just follow that process of kicking low, kicking middle, and kicking into a light stretch. Now, the trick is not to kick into too much of a stretch here. So we're not winding that up by kicking into too much pain. We're actually just letting it coach through by itself. As it improves, you can kick a little bit further in, and we're going through there. So you've got your strap stretch, and then you've also got your PNF style stretch there. Okay, so switching up now. We're just going to pull into that stretch. Now you might notice you might have a difference in tension in each side, or you might be able to get a leg higher than the other. That's pretty standard. Now remember, this down leg, don't let that hip open up by letting the toes drop away. Keep those toes pointed to the roof. And we're in for this strap stretch, pulling those toes back on the top leg so you're getting maximum stretch along that posterior chain. And then if you do have a strap, kicking low, kicking middle, and then kicking into the light stretch there. Okay, so working those two options, you can use a door frame like we've just mentioned. That works perfectly. And then you've even got a different option again, which is our leg lower. Now, if you've got the door frame, you can raise your other leg in line with this leg and lower the leg down, tapping the heel on the floor. So there's three options you have. Whether you have a door frame, a belt, or a strap, you can really target posterior chain here. And the trick is to get your bum, if you are using a door frame, as close to the wall as you can. Ideally, by the end of it, we've got our bum against the wall and our toes on our down leg are pointed to the roof as well. So that's probably the end state. And then with our PNF, we're obviously kicking into it a little bit deeper. So next up, we have a strap stretch. Oh, sorry, couch stretch. So we're going to need an object we can get close to here, which I'm just using a footrest, and we're going to be here for a minute. So ideally, we want, like I have here, bum to heel. If we don't have that ability yet, we can come further away and then creep back as we feel that hip extension improve. And then also, if we need to lower that foot, we can just get an object that's a little bit lower to base off here. So what we're aiming for is squeezing that glute, breathing into the belly, and breathing out. So that's as simple as a couch stretch is, but what you'll feel, you might feel that tightness through the front of the hip there. But then if we're looking at like tight hip flexors, like our hip flexor group of muscles, we've got one called the iliopsoas, which runs from our lower back all the way through to the front of our hip. Well, that's where the hip flexors go. So if we find we've got lower back pain from being crouched over at a desk all day or sitting, getting into extension will actually lengthen that group of muscles that runs all the way through hip to lower back and help potentially reduce a lot of that lower back stiffness that we suffer. So we're here for a minute or so, and we're just going to change that up in place here. We're just going to switch. Now, like I always say, if it hurts the knee, just get a pillow, something underneath it that can wear a bit of the brunt, because quite often our poor little knees aren't used to actually having direct weight on them. So don't be afraid if you actually feel like that's sore or painful. Just get something underneath. And like I said, start further away from the footrest or the couch or whatever you're using, and working gradually as you feel competent and confident to do so. Just going to be here for a minute, breathing into the belly. And the best thing about this style of training team, if you're coming back to activity or even just as an active recovery session, this type of low intensity interval training, lit style training, you can do it day in, day out with minimal effect. Probably no negative effect if you pick the right exercises. And you can sub these with your easy days. If you are tired, sore, stressed after a day of work, this takes literally no brain power to do, and you're not pushing into pain or making yourself jump around a room and get hot and sweaty. You're focusing on just moving well. So it's a really easy way to optimize or achieve good movement competency around a busy schedule, because you're not pushing yourself into too much fatigue. Next up, we have our bridging component. So I'm going to go through a elevated leg lock bridge, but you can do this from the floor if you have nothing else available. And I'm also going to add a little bit of a upsell to our skill. Whoop! Don't throw that across the living room if you're at home with the family. I'm going to use a leg lock bridge, but I'm going to elevate myself as well. So we're going to have the down leg on top of the footrest that I'm using here as the driving leg. And then I'm going to pin this ball in against the base of my rib cage, so the bottom of my rib cage, with this leg. Now, no hands. I'm simply just going to do 15 bridges like so. We're driving up. And the aim is to not let that ball fall out. Now that makes us work in flexion and extension and elevates the difficulty of this leg lock bridge. And once we're done, switch it over. Now, if you can't keep the ball in there, quite often we find our leg wants to drop throughout the movement. Just take the ball away and keep working the bridge until you can keep that position. And another tip for young players, if you need to go to a double foot bridge with it elevated, so both feet down, do that too. Or if you need to regress all the way to the floor, that's okay too again. So the idea is to get the range, especially if you're going for the leg lock. There's no point just having to reset every time because the ball keeps falling out. So find the level that's appropriate for you. Now, as with most things while I'm talking and coaching, I've lost count, but that's about 15. And then what we're going to go through now is a couple of standing variations to bring all this back in. Actually, sorry, I'm jumping a step here. We're going to go through some hamstring walkout options. Now, using a simple thing like a bow slide, which we'll use in a second here, we're going to start with a basic hamstring walkout, and then I'm going to show you some slide options which will allow you to sort of go through the motion. So we're aiming for 15 to 25 reps here, high rep work for this type of stuff. Our basic hamstring walkout is bridging and walking out with our heels out to full knee extension and walking back in. Okay, so that's level one. That's where we want to be if we don't have any equipment at home. So we're just simply walking out on our heels and coming back like so. Now, if we have a bit of cardboard or even one of these valve slides here, they're pretty cheap, pretty easy to get a hand on. We can use our hamstring slides. Now, you can also use socks on a hardwood floor. That works perfectly. If you have fluffy enough socks, you can use that. So you don't need a lot of fancy equipment, but basically we're bridging up and we're coming back like so. So if we have that at our disposal, This is obviously more preferable than the walkouts because it's a little bit more difficult, and the aim is to keep that bum up, squeeze, and then pulling those heels back towards us. So keeping the glutes up as high as we can, so the hips up as high as we can, really isolates our hamstrings. Okay, so we've got 15 to 25 reps there, and then we take it back to standing, where we're going to work some hip hinge patterning, but then I'm going to give you some single leg or some deadlift options to work in, and we're aiming for about 25 reps here. But the first one is just simply going to be our bum touch against the wall. Now, if we're too close to the wall, we'll be able to just sit against there pretty easily. What I want you to do is come away from the wall and try and touch your bum in that hinge position where your toes are falling back or peeling up off the floor. So you'd almost want to feel like you're falling back or just before that point. And we're simply reaching our bum back and touching the wall behind us. Now, the trick is to maintaining neutral spine, so not rounding, but using the bum to reach for the wall behind us. Chest fall, hips to the wall are the cues I want you to use. So the chest falls at the same rate the bum goes back. You should feel that through glutes and hammies, and that's about it, with no load in your hands. And we're going to go for about 25 reps. If this is your level, I want you to stay here and keep working that for your 25. The next option, we can start adding weight. Simple kettlebell here. We can go into that hinge position once we're confident to do so. Once we're feeling pretty good, we can also go to a B stance, so toes in line with heels, and we can start loading single leg here. So we can really isolate sides. Now, if you're someone like me with ankle, knee, hip, lower back issues, this is a great option to not push into just a single leg stance yet, but isolating each side to work on a single leg without the balance constraint. And if you've got torn ligaments in your ankle like myself, it's a really good option. So we're aiming for about 25 reps there. Really grease the groove, team. Don't let that background. It's all about neutral spine, chest fall, hips to the wall. Okay, and that's one round through. We're going to go through 2 more times. So, like I'm doing is just coming back to my app so I don't forget what I've got bloody going on. But we're going to start strap stretch. You can use your doorway, you can use the leg lower. It really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to sit here, actually. I'm going to try and push into the stretch a little bit more now because I've really started to work that posterior chain, and I'm going to be here for a minute. So what I'm going to do is use breathing. And on the breath out, I'm going to imagine this hamstring really relaxing into the stretch. So I'm also going to tense that quad, which will help take a bit of the load off the hammy. I'm just going to be here for a minute. So breathing into the stretch is an important tool and technique we can use. Now I've hit a pretty good stretch here and I'm going to hold. Notice how my voice or my breathing hasn't changed, and I'm just feeling enough of a stretch to sit here through it. So that's okay. Taking your time through that and just sitting. Depending on how wound up you are for the day, might also dictate how far you can get into the stretch. So don't add undue stress to the stretch. If you've only got a certain amount of range, just take it, team. So quads tensed, breathing in. Pulling in once you get a little bit of range. Now, you might notice that one side's better than the other. That's perfectly normal. Work with what you got. If you have a really big difference though, let the weak side dictate the amount of range you take. So if you've only got this much on one leg and this much on the other, work within this range and really work more on the weaker side, and then just double check the other side, work a little bit more, and then don't put as much effort into it. Focus on the asymmetry as best you can. Okay, coming out of that, into couch now, straight up into here. Couch stretch, squeezing glutes, nice and tall. Breathing in. As you can see, cruising through this morning. You might notice you start breaking into a bit of a sweat. That's okay too. What that would probably be though, if we're challenging range and stability, it's probably our brain causing us to sweat because neurologically we're challenging our range of motion and our brain will be under a perceived little bit of stress. You might start to get a bit sweaty. Your heart rate might elevate a little bit, but the trick is to work within your limits. Don't force into it. If you're having a good day, yeah, push into a bit more range, increase the difficulty of each move. But if some days where we don't have the goods, take our time, cruise through. There's nothing wrong with that. Changing it up, team in position. Squeezing glutes, breathing in. The breath out, big sigh of relief. Dropping that hip. Quite easy this one. We're going to go into bridging, hamstring walkouts and deadlifts after this. Now you might find that your hips are starting to feel really good in extension. There's nothing wrong with that. So if we have sort of maximized that for the day, we can then make it a 30-second effort. We don't really have to spend a lot of time there if we're feeling good. Now, I'm going to go for hamstring slide. I'm going to go for 15. Remember, you can just do the hamstring walkout, but let's go for 15 to 25 reps, depending on how you're feeling. All right, 15 reps done there. Now, hip hinge patterning against the wall, if that's our level. Don't be afraid to spend some time here, team. Remember, to the point where the toes just feel like they're about to peel up off the floor. So if this is all we have, this is actually a good place to be because we're lengthening our posterior chain and taking the focus off the lower back. I'm going to go for B stance. I'm going to go for 10 reps each. Changing it up. You can change the load in the hands too. Either side will have a different effect. All right, back into strap stretch for our final round now. Now you can see these are actually quite quick once we start to get the momentum on there. I'm going to go for a leg lower this particular time. So choose what works for you. Just working for that minute. Take your time, team. Try and increase that range once you feel it give you that range. Don't force it. And change it over. Easily just slip that in. So if you're doing the leg lowers through the door frame, do those. Work for about a minute. If you're doing a strap stretch, just work the stretch. Either way, toes are pointed to the roof on that down leg that's doing the moving. Make sure that hip doesn't open up to grab that extra range and let your body lead the way. And coming out nice and easy into couch. Final time through this one now, team. Just sitting nice and tall. Hopefully you've worked a little bit further back towards that foot with those hips if you're feeling the improvement in the range there. So if you haven't, just keep working. Just keep working. If you do this consecutively over a couple of weeks, you will notice the position improve. And like I said, it's just like that trigger point. If you want to work individually on any of these stretches in your own time outside of your workouts and things like that, do that. The more time you spend, if you are in pain or you don't move optimally or you feel like you need to improve it, spend the time. It's a simple metric of time in, team. Unfortunately, when we let our bodies get to a point where we're not moving well and we're potentially a little bit worse for wear, if it took us a few years to get in that shape, it's going to take more than 28 days to get us out of it. So it's important to be kind to yourself, take your time, but it's also important that you persist with it. Don't just give up because things are hard initially or you don't have the ideal range. Take your time. This should be a lifetime thing to try and maintain good movement throughout. If you've had any significant injuries, yeah, it's time to be even more patient because injuries and different pathologies and that sort of stuff can do all sorts of funky things to your body. So going down the rabbit warren, understanding what the cause and effects are and knowing what your limitations are if you do have them now are important. So understanding what that process is. Now, I think I missed the hip bridging on that second round. So if anyone's watching back now through the interwebs, I apologize. I got a bit ahead of myself. So 15 reps here. If I missed it and you're questioning and cursing at me, just go back and do another set or pause the video. It's pretty easy to fix. This one's live as we go now, so I just got to let it go. So driving up, focusing on that glute squeeze. Oh, ball even fell out on that last rep. Look at that. So even people like me have their little infallible qualities. All right, 15 reps, team. Whether you're working on the floor or on an elevated position or even double foot if that's where you're at. 15 reps. And like with most things, I can't count for buggery, so I forget when I'm coaching. But you should be able to count because you're not I'm talking all the time. So slides again, I'm going to go for slides. You got hamstring walkouts if you need. Glutes are up, keep them up, and 15 reps. Good. And final round through this, I'm actually going to add my slant board into play here. Our deadlifts, I'm going to raise my toes, and just go through a standard deadlift. But you have the hip hinge pattern against the wall. You can also do it against that footrest as well and have your calves in contact. But I am going through 25 reps with my toes elevated because I really want to dial in on that posterior chain. Couple extra reps there just because it felt good. And we are done, team. There we have it. Quick 40-minute turn and burn, including me probably talking way too much. There is a quick workout you can do to help improve posterior chain length throughout the day. You can break it down. You can do it all in one go. You can do all sorts of things to make it work for you. It's really just about application and effort in. Scotty, hello, mate. I see a few people have jumped on this morning. Like I said, though, I missed that hamstring walkout in the hip bridge in that second phase of the final part. Feel free to chuck that back in and have a fantastic day.